Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob LaQuire. And today we're going to talk about offensive lines that are trending down after the first wave of free agency. And pretty much these are O-lines that are work in progress, as the title of the episode suggests. These are units that are going to take draft resources probably not only this year, but next year, and probably still need a veteran free agent addition to make whatever is going this coming season for week one come to that. And so I think this is a good point to kick it off. What really stood out to you in kind of this first wave that indicated this team really doesn't know what they're doing with their offensive line unit? And I like kind of the fallout from that, because I think this could turn a bad situation last year into a terrible situation that could get a lot of people fired.
Yeah, and you're obviously referring to the Houston Texans there, right? And it's funny, on Tuesday we did the trending up O-lines, and one of the O-lines we had was the Washington Commanders. And why were they trending up? Because they plucked Houston's Pro Bowl level left tackle away from him for pennies on the dollar in terms of trade compensation. You remember what Houston had to trade to get Tunsil, and now they're getting it amounts to a first round pick, but it's a bunch of picks that get to that level. It's like we got a first round value for Christian McCaffrey. The highest pick we got was like the 60th pick, right? We didn't truly get a first round pick, and that's how it feels with Tunsil. And then we talked about the Vikings as well, shedding some of the players that they had last year who are quite poor. And then we kind of, in a roundabout way, get to the Texans, who are our number one trending down O-line unit, and they picked up those players that the Vikings cut or just let walk. They even traded for one of them. And then they send away their good left tackle, a former, I think it was the 15th overall pick in Kenyon Green.
Yep.
Didn't live up to that billing, but certainly not a horrible player on that offensive line by any means. And they're doing a lot of wheeling and dealing, trying to retool that O-line. Maybe under a different O-line coach, things can be better, because when a unit's that poor and you switch O-line coaches in the offseason, like the Texans did, that can be attributed to it. But I think they're also downgrading the quality of the player, the actual talent that those people on the O-line had last year. And to come away with Cam Robinson as, like, right now slated to be the starting left tackle. They lose Kenyon Green. They have Juice Scruggs. We don't know if he's going to be center or if Jarrett Patterson's going to be center. Titus Howard is going to be the right guard, we think. And then Blake Fisher, whom they drafted, I believe, in the second round last year, is going to be the right tackle. He might move to left tackle because that's what he was supposed to be in college before he was injured at Notre Dame. And then Joe Alt kind of took his lunch money and ran away with it. We saw how well that worked out for both Notre Dame and Alt, because he was a top 5 pick last year. But it just seems like it's really what are the Texans doing this offseason? And then when you look at some of the moves that they've done outside of outside of just the O-line, they gave Titus Howard, who I think is going to be their right guard, a full restructure. So his cap hit next year is going to be monumental, like well north of $20 million for, and that's not worth the price that they're paying for him. Then they give, it's not Will Anderson, the other rusher, Danielle Hunter. They gave him a pretty big extension, making him the second highest paid edge rusher in the NFL on an annual value, which I know he's a good player. I don't think he's better than Will Anderson, and I don't think you needed to give him this extension. Maybe they just wanted to make the Bengals pay more for Trey Hendrickson. I'm not super sure there, but it seems like they kind of lack a vision, in my opinion, for this entire offseason, and the O-line is really the face of that lack of vision, so to speak. This is a team that's going to need, I think, at least 2 picks on the O-line if they want to feel comfortable going into next season, because you look at how CJ Stroud played from his rookie year, where he wasn't pressured a lot and they schemed up a lot of good stuff, to last year when he was pressured a ton. CJ Stroud was not a good quarterback last year when that happened. And if you're going to continue to do that to him, the returns that you get on a QB that you took second overall, who looked very, very promising in his rookie year, to where he is now, are not going to be very, very good. That was the theme of our episode on Tuesday, protecting your young QBs. The Texans are doing the opposite.
Yeah, it's unfortunate what's going on in Houston. And obviously, you have a new offensive play caller that's going to be in the building, potentially a new O line coach. There's a lot of reshuffling that's happening in the building in Houston. So we could definitely see a 180 change. What I will say is the additions of Ed Ingram and even Laken Tomlinson, those are currently guys slated to be backups. And Trent Brown was also recently signed. He was a right tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals last year, longtime New England Patriots right tackle. And so that's a guy that I think brings veteran presence to the room, is raising the floor of what kind of like happens when a guy gets injured and there's a reshuffling across the offensive line. And so I'm liking some of that. But for those of you who are watching on YouTube, there's a graph here that's showing pretty much the free agent acquisitions or guys that were traded. And the big hiccup on Laramie Tunsil was kind of like the penalties, the false starts, some of just the stuff that you should be able to clean up with basic coaching and practice. These aren't like things that are actually going on in terms of the play itself. So when you look at that, obviously that's something that the Commanders have to worry about. But that was the big knocking point about the Texans. So it's like, okay, maybe you switch that out, and now you have Cam Robinson in the building. If he can provide at least okay left tackle play while you're figuring out what the future is at that position, I can understand what the Texans are doing here. But you still got to attack the draft with that in mind, that we need guys, and anybody that falls to us or we feel like is a fit and can improve this offensive line room, you have to take, because this is a offensive line unit that has not necessarily improved, and you could say has regressed. And that's not good when you, like you said, you have this young quarterback that you want to protect after shelling out big money for Nico Collins last year. Like you said, Daniel Hunter, you not only signed him last year, but now you restructured him to where he's one of the highest paid players in the NFL. And you do the same with a guy that's going to play guard for you, and is a poor one at that, and Titus Howard, on top of the fact that you just signed Derek Stingley to the highest paid cornerback contract. That was part of the reason why Laramie Tunsil had to go. But it's like, if you're going to pay all these guys, you still have to protect the investment. Otherwise, you're not able to accomplish what you're setting out to do, which is to win games and put yourself in a situation where you can go win a championship.
Well, do you feel good about any of those five starters, like locked in as being an average or plus player for them at the moment? Because when you say you have to attack the draft in multiple positions, like, I agree with you. Like, left tackle to me isn't 100% solved. I know Cam Robinson went to Alabama, but he hasn't really lived up to the pedigree of being a first-round pick. Ed Ingram was so bad that the Vikings went out and acquired two interior offensive linemen and paid him quite well. We talked about that on Tuesday. Juice Scruggs and Jarrett Patterson were quite poor last year. Titus Howard, like you're saying, being paid a lot of money now to give out average production to below average. Hopefully with a new O-line coach, it'll help. And then Blake Fisher wasn't the best at right tackle last year. So you really need to up the investment, I guess, in the draft. And I think you need to go early with O-line. I think the Texans hold let me look, I think it's the 25th pick. Yeah. I think that's like we talked about Tyler Booker range, maybe Kelvin Banks range. If he falls that far, that's somebody they should be looking at. But then you got to look at receiver too, right? If you're the Texans, because Tank Dell probably not coming back at least early in the year. So you're left with Nico Collins, who was in and out last year. They have a lot of work on the offensive side of the ball in particular. The only position you really feel good about is C.J. Stroud or Joe Mixon. I think they extended him in the offseason or during last season. But still, this is an O-line that's definitely trending down and might be the most of a work in progress O-line that we see in the NFL this season.
I will say about the other positions, you forgot about them trading for Christian Kirk, and obviously he's coming off injury. They also signed Justin Watson from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's at least a viable wide receiver 3 option paired with some of the other guys they have on depth. I'm not as worried about the wide receiver room here. When you look at the offensive line, I could see them potentially grabbing CJ Stroud's ex-teammate and Josh Simmons if he falls due to injury or character concerns. And that's a guy that I think truly could play left tackle. And that really, I think, would change the dynamic of the line, where obviously you're getting average to below average production across the rest of it. But if you have a true above average starter at left tackle, it kind of shapes what you can do in both the pass and the run game. And I think that would change the impact and the outlook, especially because it would be a lot cheaper than extending Laramie Tunsil, who is a 30-year-old left tackle, to a pretty much a third extension, a big deal when this guy is as old as he is. So I can understand the Texans' concern, but then you have to, like you said, you have to hit on a guy at pick 25 if Kelvin Banks, Josh Simmons is there, and then still take a couple stabs at guys that we're going to talk about later that have athletic traits, that have the potential to be a star in this league if everything falls right. And again, like you said, this is going to depend on the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator and understanding the cohesive vision they see for that unit and players they're looking for to fit that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Josh Simmons, his medicals have to check out too. He had quite a bad knee injury in the middle of last season, and he actually didn't block for C.J. Stroud. He transferred from, I believe it was San Jose State. He was at Ohio State the last 2 years. So if they overlapped, it would have been like during Stroud's pro day after Simmons transferred there. But there is the Ohio State rapport for sure. But I think the point we're making with this team is there needs to be a lot of improvement in the O-line, and they really need to be a team that's targeting O-line early and often throughout the draft.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a cool tidbit. I thought Josh Simmons played his whole career there, but again, just lack of research on my part, and you learn something new every day.
Well, and think about how good you have to be to transfer from a smaller school to be left tackle at Ohio State for a couple years. Like, he was a really good player. Like, Ohio State usually recruits their guys, 3-4 year players, but Simmons was a special guy throughout college, and it's a shame that he got hurt, and I think he was trending to be probably the first O-lineman taken before that injury. Hopefully he bounces back and we're able to see him this season.
And if the medical is clear at the Ohio State Pro Day, he was still moving on some of these drills where it was like, okay, that's impressive. And if everything checks out, this is a guy that will be a first round pick. It's just a matter of how far he falls due to missing the back half of the year last year. A team that does have their left tackle did extend to a big third contract is Trent Williams with the San Francisco 49ers. Their offensive line unit outside of that is pretty abysmal. And it's shocking that they lose, I would say, an average starter in Aaron Banks, a good depth piece in Jalen Moore and Charlie Heck, and you don't add anybody else in free agency. And my question to you, Jacob, when we talk about this unit and we talk about them about to potentially pay Brock Purdy top tier 1 quarterback money, 55, potentially $60 million a year, that you're not protecting that investment at all, because can you name me anybody outside of Trent Williams that's starting on that 49ers offensive line?
I was going to say Aaron Banks, but he's not there anymore. And that's just even more of a concern, I suppose, if none of the names come to mind.
They had a third-round pick that's playing right guard currently, or slated to play right guard. Third-round pick last year. Ring a bell?
Oh, Dominic Puny, right?
Yep.
Yes. I thought he was quite good as a rookie. McKivitz, right?
Yeah.
Right tackle.
Exactly. Jake Brendel is slotted as their center, and Ben Barch is their left guard. So again, the right side, like you said, a couple names, guys that aren't too shabby, but again, not a lot to write home about.
Well, and what makes that even more interesting, right, between Banks and Jalen Moore, they both got favorable deals on the open market, right? Aaron Banks goes to Green Bay with a 4-year deal. I think it comes in just under $80 million. And then Jalen Moore goes to Kansas City to presumptively be their starting left tackle. I think he got $30 million over 2 years, and I don't think they're paying that kind of money if they want competition there, because this was a depth piece that they targeted early in free agency. So I think he'll have a chance to be the starting left tackle there. They need a lot of work. I guess that's the point we're trying to make. I know we talk about Laramie Tunsil as being a bit older and stuff like that, maybe a bit on the decline. Trent Williams is even older than that. And while I don't think his decline has been as noticeable, he's been in and out of the lineup the past couple of years. He's up there in age. They ask him to do a ton of things. He pulls, he does everything at left tackle. He's not getting any younger. So the point I'm trying to make here is like the Texans, they need help everywhere. But I think that they're in a better position to acquire that help. They pick 11th overall right now, and that's kind of Armand Membu, who we talked about last week, Will Campbell territory. If they slip out of the top 10, and I'm not sure Will Campbell will after they correctly measured his arm length to be 33 inches at the LSU Pro Day. I think he's going in the top 6 or so. But if he makes it to 11, I think that would be a big boon for them, for the 49ers. But again, they're a team with a lot of spots to fill now as well.
Yeah, no, the 49ers have gaps to fill, especially on the offensive line. Membu, if they take him at 12, you could play him at left guard. And I think you have a boost there on the left side playing next to Trent Williams. And after Trent Williams either retires or if he were to get hurt, it's kind of like the Tyler Smith situation with the Dallas Cowboys a couple of years ago when they had Tyron Smith at the end of his tenure and were able to slot Tyler Smith out the left tackle when he missed time. So I think that would be a perfect segue and a great direction to go for this team, especially when it seems like they're pretty set with their wide receiving core being Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, and Jawan Jennings. And I think that's a good group, especially when you're trotting out George Kittle, Isaac Guerrero, and hopefully a healthy Christian McCaffrey. And that's something to work with on offense. And I think that is how they can take the unit from kind of like borderline. This is definitely a below average unit. And I think with a couple injuries, you're talking probably one of the worst in the league. So in order to prevent that, I think you do have to invest in that group early.
For sure. And I have more questions about their defense, quite frankly, following this free agency period, losing two pretty good starters. I don't think Hufanga is the all-pro he was a couple years ago, but they have questions everywhere. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them attacking the defense in the first round either. Speaking of a team that really needs to attack the defense, the Bengals, right? They've been quite active this offseason, even last offseason too, giving Burrow the stuff, tagging T. Higgins, tagging him again this year. But they get the deals done with both of their star wide receivers. Now they got to figure out the interior of that O-line. Marius Mims, who I think filled in admirably when he was asked to last season. He was their first-round tackle pick from Georgia last year. I think you can slot him in as a starter, but after that, I think on the right side. But then the interior gets really, really dicey.
Yeah, I mean, they cut Alex Kappa. He's now a Las Vegas Raider. Orlando Brown is still your left tackle. And they have this prototype for their tackles, but they haven't figured out the interior of their offensive line. And you make such an investment in Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. And if you're not able to protect your quarterback who's getting the ball to your star players, then like what's going on here? It's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And
this has been a thing since they've had Burrow. It's the meme. Does Burrow throw to Chase and get sacked and destroyed by defenders, or does he have a good O lineman and throw to anybody? And clearly they've chosen the throw to Chase and now to T. Higgins route, but they still got to figure out that interior.
And they have to figure that out because Joe Burrow's already had two season-ending injuries. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have a third one, especially with some of these cap hits and how you've allocated resources for this team. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a first overall pick, which I mean is great for a draft where you can maybe trade back and accumulate more draft picks and rebuild the team. But again, this goes back to a statement that why am I blanking out on the Buffalo Bills general manager Brandon Beane. There we go. I was going to say Joe Shine, who came from Buffalo Bills. And I was like, no, he's with the Giants, but pretty much said like having the luxury of picking in the top 10. Like if you're picking in the top 10 consistently, this shows that you're not a good team. Like you're getting lucky based on your star players going down and being able to rebuild from having a top 10 pick. So it would be a little cheap from that standpoint. I could see an overhaul from the Bengals, but this is a group that I think they got to figure it out in the draft. You got to draft some guards. You got to draft a center. And there's nothing really out there in free agency that I would say, ooh, that's great. Maybe a Brandon Sheriff, if you're looking for like a 1-year fix. Will Hernandez, I think, is still a free agent, and he was with the Cardinals last year. Those are guys where it's like, if you need something right now, those are guys I would lean towards, and then drafting a guy or two and hoping that works because you got to do something to protect your big money investments.
Yeah, and you brought up center, and I think it's important to note that I'm not super high on the centers in this class. I know Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. I think we talked about him a little bit on Tuesday. He'll probably play center at the next level. Then you're kind of left with guys like Jared Wilson from Georgia. Marcus Embo might kick into center, the tackle from Purdue. But not a lot of centers in this draft that you can really feel good about being day one starters. So that's the question.
Do
But then they
you
also
like
need
Ted
guards too.
Karras? Like Ted Karras is their
The
starting
old
center
center,
right
like
now.
I remember they paid decent money. He came from the Buccaneers, right? Or no, he
Yep,
was from the Patriots,
it
and
was
Kappa was from the
Patriots.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, Kappa went Bucks
yeah,
the Bengals.
he's okay, right? But I feel like with such a massive investment in Burrow, and you talked about him having 2 season-ending injuries, he's never had a full training camp. And like that's the whole thing with them is he's hurt in September and it's a slow start and they have to catch up like because it's like the tortoise and the hare. They have to catch up because all the other teams have won in September. But yeah, like he's okay, I guess, but I want him being like my 5th best O lineman, not my 3rd best. So that if they don't figure center out early in the draft, they got to figure out guard.
Yeah. And I mean, they picked up Lucas Patrick from the New Orleans Saints. He didn't have a terrible year last year, but again, like I think that's the same level of Alex Kappa. Like you need somebody that's actually going to raise the floor for that interior. And Kappa was not a floor raiser last year. I don't think in this case Lucas Patrick is either. And so to move on from a team with a lot of holes and questions on their offensive line to a team that has a lot of holes all over their roster, including the quarterback position. But the New York Jets, I think, find themselves in a situation. You lose Morgan Moses. They might sign Tyrone Smith again. They go out and they sign Josh Myers in free agency. They pick up Chukwuma Okafor. Previously with the Patriots last year, didn't play really much with the Patriots last year, dealing with a injury. And then previously with the Steelers before that, he'll be the right tackle potentially. He might be the left tackle if Morgan Moses, the guy the Patriots picked up. No, what am I talking about? I'm getting all my guys confused. With the New York Jets, he would be their right tackle, their first round pick out of Penn State last year. He's their left tackle. Elijah Vera Tucker would be the right guard. Josh Myers is the center. I got completely sidewinded there with the New England Patriots for some reason because he was with New England last year. But coming from that background, I still have a lot of questions about that left guard position. The right tackle, I think he's at best a average, not even average starter. I would say he's probably like, if we're talking about right tackles, if I'm going to rank him, he's probably like 25th or I would
replacement
say
level.
Yeah, like it's one of those situations like this. Like if anything, if he stays healthy and this whole entire offensive line that you're trotting out stays healthy, then it's a decent offensive line. But it's not going to stay healthy. So this is where you need to find either answers in free agency or through the draft. And so with the Jets, because you don't have the quarterback situation, I think figured out. Even though Justin Fields is kind of that 1 year fill in the blank. I don't know. This is another perplexing situation for a new general manager and head coach.
Well, at least they were proactive last year, right? In drafting Fashanu from Penn State instead of like Brock Bowers or something. Because remember, they traded down with the Vikings, took him at pick 11. I like Fashanu as a player. I think he was top 5 or 6 for me on my board last year. Really good player. I think he'll do a good job for them this year. But after that, excuse me, you're right. A lot of holes across that offensive line. I don't think you would feel good about most of the guys starting. Maybe Vera Tucker and Fashanu, and then at that point, right, you're that's the thing with
Josh
a lot of these
Myers,
lines.
like he's probably a decent center there, and so I'm not going to hate on that. But again, it's 2 holes on that offensive line, and you're really counting Olu Fashanu to take his game to the next level for that to be a competent group.
Yeah, or you could re-sign like 46-year-old Tyron Smith again, but not sure that's the best thing. As far as draft capital goes, they hold the 7th pick, and that's really like first or second O lineman territory. So they're in good position there. But like you said, a lot of holes across the offense as a whole. They could be a Tyler Warren team. They haven't had consistent tight end play there in years. That could be like his landing spot. And then their defense, while they have I think stars at levels. I think the defense as a whole has regressed pretty heavily, especially since they got rid of Saleh. He was covering up a lot of the warts that they had, and you kind of saw the defense fall off after he left. They have holes across the entire team is what we're trying to say. And this is another team where it feels like you got to take multiple stabs at the offensive line in the draft. I think really they need to do it early, because even though Fields is a 1-year rental stopgap guy, if he shows something, maybe he gets like the 3-year whatever deal. Like he's the new I don't know, like the new Kirk Cousins in terms of like 3 years until we get our franchise guy, right? But you need an O-line for that to happen. And I think you really should be attacking it early in the draft. Hopefully they take an O-lineman so it pushes some of the premium positions down to the Panthers, who pick directly after them.
Darren Mogi, the new Jets general manager, he comes from the Denver Broncos. It will be very interesting to see the team building approach. I could definitely see a trench approach, and there's good interior defensive linemen. There's good interior offensive linemen. Obviously, there would be more value in taking, I think, an interior defensive lineman over the offensive lineman. However, I think if Will Campbell, Archen Membu, is there. I don't know about Kelvin Banks. What I like about the two that I just mentioned is that you could honestly play him at left guard next to Olu Fashanu and really feel confident about the group that you have outside of right tackle. And I think that completely changes the outlook for that group and what you're trying to build for your future quarterback. Because again, Justin Fields is a bridge quarterback. They're not happy with that. And so it'll be interesting to see if Aaron Banks goes, okay, I'm happy with the secondary that we have, the guys that we have on the back end. This is a deep interior defensive line class. I love the edge rushers that we have on this team. We should go offense, build the O-line, and then take a couple defensive guys, maybe take another wide receiver on day 2, day 3, the pair with Garrett Wilson, and kind of rebuild the wide receiver room. Now I see a vision for this team. And that could be the direction they go. And where you talk about like potentially taking a tight end there, like with a Tyler Warren, for me, I would go like Harold Fannin, get a baller on day 2, day 3, and just roll the dice with that. The pair with Garrett Wilson, the running back duo they have, and what would be I think a really solid, at least left side of an offensive line.
It's a good thing you said day 2, day 3, because at first I thought you meant Fannin at the 7th overall pick. And based on your rant last week, I think you would go even crazier if he went 7th overall as opposed to Tyler Warren. But yeah, I like that. I think Membu could be like their starting right tackle as well. He played primarily on the right side this past season at Mizzou. And like you're saying, Okafor does not inspire confidence as the starter on the right side. Last team that we're going to talk about here is the New Orleans Saints, and they aren't really trending down as much as these other teams are, as much as they're just a bad O-line unit, right? I think it really started when they didn't trade up, they traded a future first that offseason for another first. That's how the Eagles ended up getting Jalen Carter the following year. It's like, oh, the Eagles just made the Super Bowl. How are they getting these good players? You can thank the New Orleans Saints for that. The Saints basically won the Eagles the Super Bowl, but they trade and get Trevor Penning at like I want to say like the 20th pick in that year's draft. Tackle from Northern Iowa. He's supposed to be like the traitsy, nasty, like mauler tackle. Hasn't really panned out. They've moved him left and right side. Hasn't worked. So last year they drafted tackle in the first round, Talize Fuanga. Move him from the right to the left. He was decent, but other than that, it was not really fun to watch. I think that's the nicest way of putting it. Ryan Ramczyk, who was their really good right tackle, was dealing with some medical stuff before the season. He didn't play at all. We don't know if he's going to play this year or again for that matter. So other than the left tackle, who you just took last year, you really are reaching for spots on that offensive line. You talk about who was it, the Bengals that signed Lucas Patrick from them. That reminds me of the Ed Ingram thing with the Texans. He wasn't very good with the team he was on. That was a bad unit. And now they go and sign him. And the Saints are losing that guy. So they have a lot of holes to fill. And I expect the Saints to be another team that has an early pick. I believe they pick 9th. Yeah, right after the Panthers. I think they're a team that would love Will Campbell to be there at 9 because they really need all the help they could get.
He's an LSU product. You're in New Orleans. There's the element of the hometown, which would be really special. For me, when I look at this offensive line, I think Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, you feel confident about what's going on at center and right guard. They signed Dylan Radunes from the Tennessee Titans this past year. He will be their right tackle. He's not a guy that inspires a lot of confidence there. And so that's an area of concern. Obviously, you have an issue at left guard. You just brought up Will Campbell. You could slot him in right there and feel really confident again about 4 or 5 spots. So we've talked about now the Jets and the Saints, where it's like you really could, if you have this elite like tackle guard prospect kind of fall in your lap, that could really make a difference from taking your offensive line to really in the 20s to potentially like an average to like borderline fringe top 12 offensive line group. And that's crazy to think about, but that's what some of these players are able to do when they reshuffle some things or they fill holes that are on that team. But again, these are 2 gaping holes, I think, on the Saints offensive line, and the center and right guard aren't getting any younger. These are older players that have been around for a minute. And so there's no guarantee that Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz are going to stay healthy. Ryan Ramczyk has effectively retired due to his injuries. And we could see that with some of these players that are getting older on that line. So nothing's a given with this. And will be very interesting to see how Kellen Moore kind of schemes around it, because Clint Kubiak did a lot of what the Shanahan tree does, and that's work around a porous offensive line. We'll see if Kellen Moore is able to do the same after working with the Cowboys and the Eagles in recent years, who had phenomenal groups up front.
Yeah, that was going to be the point I was getting to. Kellen Moore is not used to this, right? I think he's going to find out very quickly that he can't run a lot of the stuff that he wants to run. And all these other teams we've talked about, like, yeah, that they should attack these in the draft, but they have a little bit of wiggle room to work with when it comes to cap space. They can sign like replacement level players. The Saints are like the team that never has cap space. If they want to sign somebody, they can't go out and get like the Tyron Smith or the Jedrick Wills or the DJ Humphries. It's going to have to be like somebody's practice squad guy is the type of level that they can sign without breaking the bank for them, because again, they're barely treading water every year when it comes to cap space. They have to extend their own players to create it every year. So they're going to have to be a team that goes after O-lineman in the draft, and whether it's at pick 9 or in the second and subsequent rounds, they're going to have to attack it if Kellen Moore is going to be able to run the stuff he wants to run.
Yeah, and time will tell how that will all play out. I think going from offensive line groups, and we can touch on one because we just talked about Kellen Moore. The Cowboys are on that precipice. This is where we were debating, talking about the Saints or the Cowboys here. You lose a Hall of Fame right guard in Zach Martin to retirement. Obviously, that is a huge hole to fill. You already had questions at left tackle with your rookie Tyler Guyton. I think Tyler Smith and the rookie last year, Cooper Beebe, will play well on the interior. And then you have Terrence Steele, a solid right tackle. Does create some issues with just kind of holes, and will they be able to take a step as a unit? And they will probably regress. I mean, you're losing a Hall of Fame kind of caliber player. What are your thoughts on that before we talk about kind of prospects that are similar to these units, where it's going to take a couple off seasons to really get that unit back on track?
Well, I think it's more than losing just like the right guard spot. Zach Martin did things that made Cooper Beebe and Terrence Steele's lives way easier, right? And so I think that you're probably going to see a decline in their play as well. And then at that point, it's like, I feel good about Tyler Smith, my left guard, but I don't feel great about any of the other positions. And to me, that's what really drew my attention to an O-line trending down, because I know they're just like losing one guy, so to speak, but he's such an important piece that I think his loss is going to affect a ton for that offensive line. So that's a team that you can look at early as well for probably an interior O-line guy, but they have other maybe bigger fish to fry, like receiver and stuff. So like, I really think they're going to be the first wide receiver team, but we'll have to see. They're at I think they have pick 12. We'll just have to see, but they have a lot of stuff to work on, particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And again, we don't know what's going to happen during the draft. It's more just these teams have issues post first wave of free agency. Are they signing more veteran players that kind of boost the depth of the roster? Are they drafting guys high? Or are they taking swings on kind of an unknown, guys that show the traits you want at these different positions, but aren't a finished product? And obviously no prospect is perfect, but I think some of the ones that we'll talk about briefly today are guys that have a lot of the traits that make you go, wow. But there are hesitations with their game. And so one guy I mentioned last Tuesday when we were on air was Logan Brown out of Kansas. This is a left tackle who's a mauler in the run game. Haven't seen a lot in the passing game. And so it's one of those things you have to be careful with kind of projecting him to the next level. And that's why he's a day 3 pick. But if this is a guy similar to what we just saw with the Bengals last year and the Jets, where they take a tackle in Amarius Mims or Olu Fashanu, and you're able to sit them next behind a veteran in Tyron Smith or Trent Brown, I think you feel much more confident about developing this player who has a lot of the tools you want at that position.
For sure. Somebody in kind of a similar mold to that, I would say I think it's Holland, is how you say his first name, Pierce, the tackle from Rutgers. He's like a huge player. I think he measured in at 6'8" at his pro day, just over 330 pounds. So really, like in the Ravens took a guy, Daniel Falele, that kind of mold, like huge player. If you can mold him into something, there's going to be a mountain, kind of like Trent Brown. You know, Trent Brown wasn't a superstar when he first came into the league. It took him a year, but once he really grew into that role, he was a menace. Like it's hard to get around somebody that big who can actually move as well. And that's the big thing with Pierce is I think there's stiffness, understandably, with the size, and he plays at too high a pad level, which is kind of funny being 6'8". Like how are the smaller rushers going to hit your pads if you're that tall? But if you're playing upright, they'll get you. So if he can really bring that in and get into a better stance and things like that, he could be somebody that's hard to move on that. I think he would be a right tackle in the league, but hard to move at that level. And those are the kind of guys you take swings on day 3. When we reviewed the Eagles draft last year, we really honed in on day 3. Like their first couple of days were exciting, but in day 3 they had Johnny Wilson, the receiver from Florida State, 6'7" guy. That was his trait, right? Then they took the speedy guy from Texas A&M. His trait was speed. And they took Will Shipley, the receiving running back out of Clemson. That was his trait. That's kind of what you have to go for on day 3 is like special teams guys and guys that stand out with 1 or 2 traits. Like, okay, if we can give this guy some seasoning, like you're saying, a couple off seasons in our program, they can be something special.
Yeah. And what's interesting about the 2 tackles we just talked about in both Logan Brown and Holland Pierce is that these are kind of like zone blocking tackles. So where we talked about the 49ers needing kind of some like help there, that's a guy that you can grab that kind of creates some depth that's going to fit your scheme. Now, when you talk about a mammoth of a player in Holland Pierce, he's 96th percentile in height and at 6'8", like you said, 95th percentile weight at being 341 pounds. Like this is a massive dude. Like you said, Trent Brown, just this colossal just dude that it's, like you said, hard to get around because you're just that big. So those 2 players are very intriguing. All of the players that we're talking about, whether it be tackle, guard, center in this section, is they all have an athletic score from Next Gen Stats from the combine of 80 or higher. So these are players that have athletic attributes that really do translate. It's just elements of their game that we're uncertain about of how that will translate when you go from college to the pros, because the college programs aren't like they used to be, where a lot of what they did prepared you for the next level. And so I think that's why it's sometimes hard to gauge which players will kind of make that jump.
For sure. I think when you have programs like Alabama in recent history, Ohio State, Georgia, you can see the translation because they try to run more pro-ready things. The Nick Saban defenses were like famous for making the players match, which a lot of defensive backs don't really do in college football. They just kind of prevent big things from happening, and you'll see how that works out in like the Big 12, right? Because teams are scoring like 50 on each other every week. But when you get to some of the smaller schools that may not have the resources, I think that's what you're talking about, where you have to kind of project how you envision them fitting into your system. And that's why you see a lot of teams, they talk about this player needs to fit our system. It's completely valid, right? Because if you see somebody that isn't, I'm not talking about blue chip players. If you can't find a way to make a blue chip player work, you shouldn't be coaching. But when we're getting into like the 75 through 150 or 125 to round out a team's board, if you see a player like Pierce, right? If he doesn't fit what you want to do, if you're a gap run scheme, you're not going to take this guy because, hey, we don't have the 2 years to wait to see if this guy turns into something in general. But then if he doesn't fit what we want to do, it's just a waste of a pick.
Yeah, it's a waste of a pick. It's a waste of time because again, it doesn't fit the scheme that you're trying to run. And I think what's interesting, I don't think he's necessarily so much a gap blocker compared to a zone blocker, but Jalen Travis out of Iowa State, where we talk about the Hollins Pierce. Hold on, yep, Holland Pierce. I wanted to say Hollins because of Mac Hollins, just Holland Pierce. Another huge guy. I mean, this is a guy that's 89th percentile in height, 94th percentile in weight, being at 6'7", 339 pounds. I mean, colossal dude. I don't think he moves as well as Pierce. And so that's where you get into a situation where it's a little bit harder to run some of those like zone running schemes because he can't kick out as well. And he can't necessarily deal with like faster edge players and really get to his point. And so that's what's always interesting about some of these players is you can get this guy that's a physical freak, but sometimes when you're that big, you can't move as well as some of these other guys, and they're able to get by you and make a play. And so you then become a liability, and all from your strength. It's crazy how some of these players' strengths can turn into a weakness just because they're not able to execute their job in kicking back.
For sure. And then kind of on the other end of that spectrum, don't think he's going to be 89th or higher percentile in the Next Gen Stats athletic score, but I think it's Ozzy Trapilo is how you say it, from Boston College. I think he's quite mobile for what he's able to do. I think he can get to the second level and be used on pulls and things like that in the run game, but then he lacks that high-end strength, and he can get his arms taken by some of these stronger defensive linemen. So it's really like once you get out of that top 75-ish to top 90, it's really like a pick your poison. Does this guy fit our scheme? Can we mold this guy? What are we going to get? And that's really, I think that's kind of the crux of what we're trying to say here with all of these prospects. And there are a couple more we didn't talk about, like Jalen Rivers from Miami, their guard, Caleb Rogers, Texas Tech. But when you get to the day three, or you can really jump and get these guys in day two if you believe in them. Look at Blake Fisher last year from the Texans. I think that's a perfect example of that. But when you take these guys that you want to fit in your system that might need a little bit of marinating, I think you need to be convicted on them. And all the teams we talked about, they need high-end talent now, right? All of them could use Will Campbell. All of them could use Gray Zabel, Tyler Booker, Kelvin Banks, Armand Membu. They could probably all start right away for these teams because their O-lines are so poor. But they also need to hone in on these day three targets, these later round targets that might not be the day one starter, but can learn behind the one or two good pieces that these O-lines already have and maybe be the heir apparent to one of those spots in the future.
And to segue exactly from that, I love that you use the word heir apparent because kicking off my perfect take, I think there is an heir apparent in the draft this year for a center that changed zip codes in the offseason. And the center I'm talking about is Drew Dahlman, who signed with the Chicago Bears, kind of left a void with the Atlanta Falcons. The guy that's slated to be the starting center is Ryan Nuzil, who, believe it or not, undrafted free agent out of Appalachian State, so a couple hours north of where we're recording this, so close to home. I don't think he's necessarily the starter. And so there's a prospect that's very similar to Tanner Bortonelli, who plays interior offensive line for the Colts, was drafted last year, had some really good play in terms of just run blocking and being able to get to the second level. And that's exactly what I see out of Drew Kendall. And I think this player out of Boston College has the ability to be a starting center for the Atlanta Falcons. And so that's my perfect take. I think whether it be some round between 4 through 7, so your day 3 picks, like we talked about a couple of episodes ago, over 50% of the draft picks where he will be drafted. I think the Falcons take him to be their starting center of the future.
That is a very specific take, team
I think
and
he
player.
fits. Like he gets to the second
Mhm.
level. It's a hole they have. He's not a guy that can play guard or tackle. He's a very much do his job, his position, and that's what he does. And so I think if you're going to take a stab at that position, he's a guy that fits what they want to do in Atlanta.
And I think Drew Dahlman kind of came out of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere because everybody comes from somewhere, but he wasn't on the radar before he became their starter. I believe they drafted Matt Hennessy in the second round. It was from Matt Rule's Temple team to be their center, and he didn't work out. So Dahlman really took the reins there. If this guy fits, like you're saying, maybe you called your shot and nailed it. We'll have to see during the draft. I'm not going to be as brave with my take today because I just really can't rationalize calling my shot on a day 3 guy that early. But you know what? You're a braver man than I am. So getting into regarding my take, we talked about the LSU Pro Day. I think it happened on Tuesday after we recorded, and not Tyler Booker, excuse me. Will Campbell's arms were remeasured. And like many of the prospects who were at the combine, the pro day measurements, which are performed by NFL scouts, by the way, they're not performed by the LSU staff because the LSU staff's going to give them like that much of like free tape measure, right? They're going to overinflate their measurements. But NFL scouts performed this and saw, hey, Will Campbell doesn't have 32 and 2/8 or whatever it was arms. He has 33-inch arms. And that's like one of the main thresholds for a lot of NFL teams for their tackles is the 33-inch arm. Is that a huge arm length for tackles? No, but it's what teams want to see. We talked about the Rashawn Slater thing, right? And the Matt Rule soundbite, he has sub 33-inch arms. He would have been a guard for us. Teams think like that. But now that they know Will Campbell has that threshold, they've seen his tape the past 2 years, he's going to be the first O lineman taken in the draft. And I know you said the Patriots are going to be the first team to take one. I think that's a natural fit there, going up to play for Mike Vrabel. Nasty player. He has the flexibility, but I think he'll be left tackle in the league. And yeah, he's going to be the first one off the board. And if your take holds true, we'll see him within the first 5 picks.
I definitely think if Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are gone before, which has been another take of mine, that they will be gone before pick 4, that it makes sense Will Campbell's the guy. I think exactly like you said, he fits their mentality, both in pass and run blocking. And that's exactly what Mike Vrabel's looking for in a player. I think he just sees a good football player in Will Campbell, whether that is a left tackle or a left guard, and they'll be willing to take a stab on that because of what he brings to the table.
For sure. We'll get more into the Carter and Hunter landing spots in the days to come because we're done with offensive draft players. We can get into the defense now, which is, I think the strength of this draft is on defense. I finished my board recently, and let me tell you, my top 10 has 8 defenders, 9 if you want to count Hunter as a corner, but I think he's going to be a receiver in the NFL, but we'll have to see. Next week, we'll be doing back to front like we did with the offense, so safeties and corners, and the week after that, linebackers, and I don't know if we'll do edge or D-line first, but then we'll be approaching the D-line, and then it'll be draft week, which is super exciting. So stay tuned. Follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods, and we will be back next week to talk about some defenders. Keep out.